Subscribe to our channel and hit the bell icon to never miss a video from us.
Talent development is not just about training, it's about building a workforce that drives business success. Our next guest on the expert interview series Beyond the Resume has mastered this art, shaping the capabilities of thousands of professionals in the banking sector. We are excited to welcome Mr. Adarsh Tandon, a forward-thinking leader with deep expertise in capability development, behavioral and business training, and digital learning transformation. With over 17 years of experience, Adarsh has been instrumental in upskilling global teams, fostering leadership, and implementing innovative learning strategies. His work in aligning talent development with business impact has led to transformative results, from digitalizing L&D programs to building strategic partnership that connects skills with opportunities. Welcome to the expert interview series, sir, and hope our viewers get to learn from your experiences.
Absolutely. Welcome for having me.
Thank you so much, sir. So we begin with the first and the most important question. What led you to specialize in learning and development, and what has kept you motivated and passionate? Because it's been 17 years now.
Great question, Pooja. So I'll say my career journey has probably been more than anything but linear. I'll say I started somewhere in corporate strategy. That was initial work that I started with, where I worked closely with teams actually on performance optimization. And however, I've always found myself drawn to actually kind of mentoring a set of people who probably are new hires and guiding the teams, which actually gradually I realized that sparked the interest in teaching. This led me to a transition into postgraduate education, I'll say, where I had the opportunity to bridge the gap between academic knowledge and the industry application. One pivotal moment came when I still remember that very fondly, was in an MBA batch, and a student approached me after class and he said, "Sir, that all sounds great in theory, but how do I apply this when my team doesn't kind of listen to me?" And this question actually changed my approach. I started looking and focusing on some of the practical aspects, real world applications, rather than actually simple theories, which I kind of looked at. And later, when I transitioned into corporate L&D, I realized the same principle needed to be applied, because I firmly believe that adults don't learn just by hearing. They actually learn by doing, experimenting, and reflecting on things that they've done. And that's what's kept me passionate about training and seeing their transformation in people's confidence, capabilities that actually has been driving that.
You are a teacher to adults, as we could say. How hard it is training, adults in real time?
It is not an easy job to do. That's the honest answer, because in most of the scenarios, you probably have people from diverse backgrounds. They have different level of experience. They have diverse set of knowledge, right? You actually would need to transition into a different role as soon as you see that somebody who's got, and there's a probability that some of the persons that you're training has got a better knowledge. You would probably have to shift gears and become a facilitator. So it's not that everything that you know, it's also about trying to ensure that the rest of the crowd who's there in that particular room get to learn from each other. And that's the journey that we all are into, which is quite fascinating times. And because I have been learning, and I still feel I'm still learning, because there is never no end to say learning. And that's what in simply put. So that's a simple answer to your question, I'll say.
Because you have a lot of experience in learning and development. How do you identify these needs of training a particular batch of people?
So when you look at training a set of people, it also depends upon what is it that he actually been doing, right? What has been their exposure? What have they done? So you kind of apply those tools and you kind of fix that skill gap, because at times there are people who want to achieve something. That's the utopian state where you want to be. And there's a state where you are from. Now, in order to fill that gap, you first need to understand what is available. What is it that the best we can do, and how is it that we can ensure that this set of people whom we are actually providing are able to kind of upgrade themselves with the resources provided. So it's actually a culmination of also an attitude as well at times, because sometimes you need to have an attitude to learn. Things don't always come easily, right? And in probably now in the world of AI, I'll say that everything's available at a click of a button, but things probably were not there a few years back. And now there's a more to kind of build to it, because some of the ways in which we do, the way we organize ourselves is also changing. So that's a dramatic change, which is actually coming into the landscape of the L&D. But yes, that's something that we are all evolving and we are all kind of working in that area.
Of course, we'll come to the digitalization part of the question later on. But the first thing that comes to my mind is you've, of course, trained 9,000 employees and above. So, and across multiple regions, what were your strategies and what was most effective strategy that you thought that is going to help you in implementing the learning programs?
I'll say that when you have to actually skill learning, it is like you have to build a kind of a bridge which is across different landscapes, and it has to be strong. It has to be adaptable. It has to be culturally relevant as well, because you have people coming from different cultures, right? So the thought of looking at it, they'll say you will probably have to move from theory to practice, and that's what I was talking earlier as well. Many L&D programs actually fail because they remain too theoretical. When we design a leadership program, say for a mid-level manager, we embed real-world business simulations where managers have to solve actual business challenges. Most of us do that. One of the participants actually, I remember saying that I applied what I learned through tough negotiation and helped me kind of close a major deal. So that's one way to look at it, and that gives you kind of satisfaction. You're probably on the right track. There's also an element called localized learning, is what I'll say. When you roll out training for teams, say if you're doing something kind of training for say Southeast Asia and the Middle East, we realize that a single global learning model may work, may not necessarily work, or I'll say it won't work. Instead, you'll have to adapt a region specific case study, language preferences. You'll have to look at what are the cultural examples that you're taking, and the engagement rate actually automatically increases when you're going to make those changes in the generic programs. With the new trend coming in and the new generations which we see now, there's something called a YouTube effect, which we see quite rampant, and especially in the corporate training. Corporate learning, because employees today don't want if you give them long, outdated training sessions, you'll definitely not keep them engaged. They're more inspired by how people learn from YouTube. You break into different, I'll say, bite-sized learning, small videos, self-paced modules, and this reduces kind of training time while increasing completion rates actually also. And this has happened in some of the areas that I've done, and it has improved by roughly around 40% in some of the statistics I've seen. So there's a lot that we actually can do, but that's been the strategy that I've looked at. And of course, there's a more to kind of do as we go on this journey.
So, as you say that the style of learning has changed, it's more of a YouTube effect. The concentration is more on bite-sized learning. Do you think it's more impactful? The outcomes are more impactful, and given the Gen Zs and the Gen Alphas that we are, training right now.
It is definitely impactful, and to a certain extent, see, the attention span of individuals is actually shrinking. I don't know if you've ever seen somebody scrolling a phone. The moment you don't find anything interesting, the Facebook page will automatically scroll up. And that's a clear example of you are not being able to hook the audience. When you're writing an article or you're writing a content, we normally call that as a hook, and there are a lot of hook strategies available. But the first line actually has to be a hook for you to actually grab the audience to make your leads. And that same happens with the learners. If they are not feeling engaged, they will probably not be able to go forward and will not be able to convey that set of message which we actually want to convey. So over a period of time, that's something which has changed. But the only thing that has not changed is that we have to keep improving over the period, find innovative ways how we can engage this set of people, because that's what is changing. And then probably the attention span might probably reduce further. Who never knows, with so much of things happening over the global space and landscape. So that's definitely a challenge for all of us to look into it, but a major one for us to think at this moment.
Now, of course, training and learning and development are both running hand in hand. So, how do you measure the impact of training on business performance, and what are the key metrics that you use to track down the performance?
I'll put it like this. Imagine you're investing in a gym membership, right? Let's say, but never tracking your fitness progress. That's the easiest way or an analogy I can think at this moment. You won't know if it's working. The same actually applies to training. You move beyond the basic course completion rates and focus on real business impact. And how do we do that? We look at behavior change and performance, right? I remember some of the leadership training programs which we used to run had a 20% reduction in project escalations because managers learned conflict resolution strategies, right? It's also time to look at productivity. So time to productivity, new hires is another challenge which some of the organizations face quite rampantly. When you revamp your onboarding strategy, you can actually cut the time for new employees to reach full productivity, probably say 6 months to say 4 months. And a direct impact can actually have that happen on business efficiency as well, because it's kind of correlated there. There's also an element which I'll think that we need to think from is retention and engagement, because employees who participate in continuous learning, they have a 15% lower attrition rate. Though I will say that's not the only reason, but that's a trend that some of the statistics do tell us that could be one of the providers of features reducing that, proving that investing is actually a growth leads to long-term commitment, right? And one of my favorite stories is I remember when an employee who after completing a training closed his biggest deal and sent an email and said, I still remember that line that clearly said the training just paid for itself. That catch line still stays with me, which means that's the kind of impact we actually aim for and we want to do it. Are we able to do it is a question that we probably need to deliberate. Somewhere we can, somewhere we've not been able to, but that's a journey that we are all evolving as we go on this.
You very correctly said that, if you're investing in an individual and if it literally pays off, it's worth the time and the investment that has been done.
Absolutely,
Right.
because that's a continuous process. Absolutely.
So you've also led digitalization learning programs, and what were the biggest challenges and how did you overcome them?
So digitization learning is like I'll say it's like convincing somebody to read the newspaper, reading who's regularly reading a newspaper to switch to a smartphone. That's a difference, I'll say, but not easy to embed. Probably if you have a legacy, but the first problem statement here is resistance to digital learning, which I've seen some of the people have spoken to and some of the areas that we've been working. What we have to do is we have to introduce e-learning. Many senior employees were hesitant in kind of adopting it. Probably they say I learn best in the classroom because that's their mode. You cannot probably have different type of learners. Somebody actually learns by seeing, somebody learns by hearing. So automatically there are different, but instead of forcing a change, you blend the old and the new. And then you offer a kind of a live virtual workshop along with, say, a digital module, and that makes it go. So that's how you kind of keep improving, and they begin to enjoy the online learning, and then they begin to prefer it. The another challenge that you see is avoiding I'll say a digital fatigue. Now, I know there are a lot of changes been happening with COVID set in. There are a lot of Zoom sessions happen, a lot of people. So that led to a kind of a digital fatigue. And many companies actually make the mistake of probably uploading some of the PowerPoints online and calling it digital learning. That's I've seen that. But instead, we should focus on interactive content, probably some kind of a simulation, maybe a gamified assessment. There could be an AI learning path, AI coming into this, and this can actually lead to a 50% higher adoption rate at times as well, which I've seen in certain cases. So that's an area that we actually need to kind of think about as well. Another important area is we need to think about making learning accessible anywhere. Now, there could be a gap between two meetings, and the person will be interested in learning, say, a 5-minute module. I know there are a lot of applications available in the market. We can think about in remote locations. There could be areas where there are limited internet. That could be area for companies to located quite deep south or deep area, wherever it is. Now, we solve this by developing an offline first module learning app. That's one area that we can think of, right? And that can be one area to kind of look at train people through that app, something that they could probably never do before. Some of the companies have adopted, and that's a journey again that we are looking into it. So there's a more change that we need to bring in from digitization. I know we've come a long way from where we were in terms of from the industry perspective, from the company's perspective, but there's a lot of amount still to be done, I'll say, and I hope that as we go and kind of spark on the journey, we will be able to improve on this area.
Thank you for elaborating on that. Just wanted to understand. So, would you say that self digitalization is more about self learning to interactive learning? I mean,
Yeah, that's important, because when I say it's a digital learning, we're not just saying that it's a one-way cascade has to be there. I will rather put it to say digital learning is about a two-way interaction. I know you would normally have somebody kind of talking to you, explaining to you. Similarly, we should think about ways how can you engage that set of people. Maybe when you're doing a simulation, there's an activity embedded, and then the person is actually engaged and doing something, so that the person feels there's somebody on the other side and you feel connected and you're keeping engaging, and that is keeping the momentum going, because you don't leave that person with a one-way download, and then you don't and let that person go in void to say, okay, there's one way knowledge coming in and I can probably look at it later, and you might lose that connect. And that's very basic thing for us to think through when we actually implement digital learning.
as we spoke about AI, of course, it's an emerging trend, and these are the emerging technologies that we're looking at. How do you see AI as an emerging technology shaping the future of learning and development and corporate training?
So if you ask me, I'll say traditional learning is like a map, whereas AI-driven learning is like a Google map. And obviously, why am I saying it? Because when I say it's a Google map, it adapts, it personalizes it, it optimizes the routines in a real time, and that's where your AI-powered personalization comes in, right? I have been myself been working a lot of AI courses myself, because I know there's a lot of change happening, and it's important for you to upgrade itself. And there is a lot of change happening, and not none of the domains are actually remaining untouched. So AI powered personalization, when you say that, we actually see, imagine you having a personal AI mentor that analyzes your learning style, will probably look at what is it works for you, what's a perfect content for you, and you implement this, and employees who are kind of doing it, they'll receive personalized learning suggestions, where probably 30% are most likely to complete the courses because it's more customized, right? And that is where you get them more engaged. Another important area in this AI domain is kind of fast catching up is something on virtual reality or VR for experiential learning, probably. And I remember that we once trained probably one of our employees in handling a high pressure customer scenario, right? And the VR simulation instead of watching a video, and they practiced handling real life issues in a safe and immersive environment. And that helped that individual, and there's definitely a clear impact that it sees. Another important area that I've seen and is growing is your AI powered skills forecasting. That's a very important area, and I'll say this is something that companies are adopting, and we're still kind of looking into a lot of the strategies, but a very powerful tool because using AI, we can actually predict the future skills gap, right, in our workforce. For example, 3 years ago, we introduced data analytics training for some of the finance teams and preparing them for automated driven job shifts, and that exactly hand. And one of my favorite moments was when an employee said, AI didn't replace my job. It actually made it better. And then I began to realize that the fear that some of the in the market or in some of the companies to have is for employees to learn is if I learn AI or AI gets implemented where I actually lose my job. The question is, if you don't really learn, you will then probably are at risk, not if you are actually kind of upgrade yourself. And that's what skill is all about. Right? We are reaching the stage where it's a skill driven economy. We're all moving in that direction. So it's important to upgrade your skill as you go on this journey. So that's two part of technology in learning, I'll say.
Thank you so much. I think this was the question I was about to ask, and you answered it beautifully. That it is you who has to learn, and AI should be taken as a friend, not as an enemy or a foe.
Absolutely.
Right. So as we move to the end of the interview, the last and the most important question for the aspirants who want to join and become L&D professionals, what is the most important skill set you think to rise up in the career? What's the advice that you want to give to them?
I'll say most of the people when they actually do, and since I was talking about the gym, is they do take a fitness coach. I rather call L&D as a fitness coach for business. That's how I define L&D as. Your role is just to reach, is to make people perform at the peak, right? And you have to learn to speak the language of business. I have seen some of the many L&D professionals who focus too much on training content, not enough on business outcomes. But I think this is an area which we need to kind of transition into. If we start focusing business outcome, we'll be able to learn and tie the learning to revenue growth, efficiency and innovation. And that's where the connect between the business and the L&D becomes much more stronger. The other important area is we also need to kind of understand that we need to adopt a growth mindset. Now, we lot of talk about growth mindset, but what real growth mindset is when we transition actually from say academia to corporate training is you have to unlearn old approaches and embrace the, in this case, probably digital learning, behavioral psychology, business strategy. And then it's also about keep evolving as you go on this journey. The other important area is I'll say storytelling is a very important superpower. And I've seen that's probably in some of the program runs fantastically if you're able to master that art at any level, I'll say. Whether you're engaging with employees, convincing leadership to invest in L&D or explaining a complex topic, storytelling will make your training memorable and impactful, and that's able to draw a large extent of influence to set of stakeholders as well. So one of the most fulfilling moments I remember was when I was actually mentoring one of the L&D professionals who actually felt stuck in a traditional classroom approach, and she later led a global digital learning transformation, proving actually that with the right mindset, L&D can actually drive business success. And that's a very important thing that's for all of us to understand and kind of transition into that area.
Thank you so much, sir. I think you've answered all our questions. And listening to the interview, it's more like you narrating a story, and I'm listening to it, and it's all imbibing all the best of it. Thank you so much for taking the time out and contributing and helping people who are going to make a career. You've done a beautiful contribution and highlighted some of the most important points that are necessary to upskill themselves, to to keep on learning. And of course, your examples are more inspiring, I should say.
Thank you so much for having me.
Subscribe to our channel and hit the bell icon to never miss a video from us.